Alrighty, I'll call the meeting to order.
You gotta do that after.
Thank you for coming out this evening. Councilmember Wozniak sends his apologies. He thinks he's coming down with the flu. I haven't heard from Councilmember Wilms, so perhaps he's just running a little late. We have one piece of old business, and that's a resolution adopting amendments to the City of Bella Vista Employee Handbook. It's unfortunate Larry's not here because he had, I think, 4 amendments that he wanted to talk about. But I'll open the floor. Glinda is here. She's going to talk about any concerns or any thoughts that you may have.
Does everyone have or recall receiving Larry's comments about?
They were handed out at the meeting last Monday.
Okay.
Let me just add before you
Go ahead.
start. This was reset or rescheduled for tonight because we had a last minute question come up, and it has to do with this proposed ordinance, which you'll find on further down the list about sick leave. So I can address that more there, but we resolved that question. But anyway, that's why we.
Okay, so one of the issues, the first amendment that he had proposed was relating to the repayment of education reimbursement for training. And he had proposed that rather than, with the period of after 6 months, they would repay 100%, but then 7 to 12 months, 75%. He proposed this. I think if I'm reading this correctly. If they leave within 0 to 12 months, it'd be 100% repayment. 13 to 18 months would be 80%. 19 to 24 months would be 60% repayment. 25 to 30 months, 40%. 31 to 36, 20%. And then after 36 months, 0% repayment. That's a lot of levels of possibilities of repayment. It's extending it cutting it up a lot, I guess I would say. And I was going to ask you to consider if you want to extend that first period of time to a year. I understand that because part of this is what we get back from educating these people. So what I was wondering if maybe a proposal could be that 0 to 12 months. So during that first year, if they were to leave during 1 year rather than 6 months, that they would repay 100%. But then we still keep it at 4 levels. So the next period of time would be then 13 months to 18 months. So adding another 6 months, they would repay 50%. After that would be 19 to 24 months, a repayment of 25%. And then after 24 months, that 25th month, they wouldn't repay anything any longer at the time. And I understand, again, that this is to help the city as well as the individual. We probably all know that times have changed and the longevity just isn't the same as it once was either. And this tuition assistance is a recruiting tool. And I think we don't want to make it too difficult for people to understand or become part of.
Does this pretty much mirror the original proposal other cities in the area?
This is very common, very normal that you would say.
The original.
Well, we didn't change this repayment schedule. Larry was proposing that we changed it.
Oh, this is Larry.
This was Larry's. He wanted to extend the repayment.
No, I understand that, but I mean the original is what's in the original employee handbook that is proposed. Is that pretty much, I'm going to call it industry standard? See, 0 to 6, 6 to 12.
0 to 6 is pretty generous. I mean, a lot of companies and cities do ask you to stay a year before they say, no, you don't have to pay anything back. That's not unusual to see. We expect you to be here a year or you would repay us. Because you could have people, I mean, we just had an instance where someone left after a few months of receiving tuition reimbursement. We can leave it the way it is, or if we feel like we need to extend it, I would suggest that we extend it just that first quadrant of up to a year.
Yes, ma'am.
This whole employee handbook thing, I don't know that as council we should micromanage it. I think we have professionals in that department who are doing the job, and I don't think we need to get into all the nitty-gritty, but I think extending it to a year and leaving the rest of what you had sounds certainly reasonable to me.
I don't disagree with what you just said at all. I mean, I went through it and, they said, from my perspective, to try to get into the weeds on it, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What is it? It's 86 pages, right?
Oh, no, more.
Is it more than 86? I thought it was 86 originally.
There is one thing I need to bring up. The tabled version, there has been another modification that the staff wanted to add, relates to the fire situation on the leave thing. So there will be a new proposed handbook with that additional change, and we will have a motion to amend in order to get that on the resolution to then vote on final approval, and then whatever other amendments you may want to approve, so.
So do you want to walk us through that ordinance?
Well, I can go ahead now. The ordinance, there are two state laws that talk about how we set police and fire sick leave. And it says the council can do all these various things by ordinance. And so, rather than us have to pass a separate ordinance to establish these sick leave numbers, we want to be able to do it the way we've done it up to now, and that is to make incorporation and changes into our employee handbook, which is where we do it. So all this ordinance does is says, for purposes of these state statutes, the council, by ordinance, is saying we're going to set those leave amounts by resolution and approval of the employee handbook. That's all it says. So it just keeps you in the future from having to adopt two things, then have to do one thing. Or you could be able to do one thing rather than have to do two things, one of them being an ordinance. So that's the only reason that we have to have that. It's just procedural. That ordinance itself doesn't actually set the number. You still do that through the adoption of the handbook. So that's what that's about.
Okay. Everybody okay? Yes, sir?
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay. I'm not proposing making a change, but it's just a thought. The bereavement for loss of a spouse or a child. Maybe I speak, from experience, and I think 3 days is not really sufficient. I think probably 7 in the future, if that's something I think you should think about. Like I said, just from personal experience, 3 days. I mean, if it's your wife or if it's your child, you've got a period of time that's very difficult when you're setting services and things like that. And then when those are done, you're going back to work the next day. And it just takes some time to kind of, you're certainly not, you don't have yourself reset by any means, but just to sit down and take stock of things, if you will. So, I mean, I would say, 7 days would probably be more appropriate. I mean, I think, over the last several years in terms of like having a child and things like that, I think, the public, the laws support, staying home with children for long, extended periods of time. Then you think about you have a life-changing event like that, and I just think 3 days needs to I think there needs to be a little more consideration there.
So what's the industry norm, Glenda?
Stated, it's usually 3 days, but in practice, companies are very flexible with people.
As long, and as long as that's a practice and that's the way it's going to be, that's a nice thing. But I read that and I'm like, well, I kind of want that.
Well, this would be the opportunity to change it if you want to.
Right.
It's open for conversation, But
You're talking specifically a spouse or child?
Mhm.
Yeah, that is,
Well, even 7 days is a short period in
Yeah.
that circumstance,
Yeah.
but it is giving something.
yeah. Yeah, I'd be all right with changing that to 7 days.
I mean,
Just
I
in the official
went back to
thing.
work after 7 days, but I could tell you I was still in a daze, kind of a haze for sure. But less than that would have been almost impossible.
So can you put something in writing for Jason, please? And
Sure.
does it have to be an amendment?
I appreciate that totally, and I agree with you. I wonder how that'll be processed, though, if we make that kind of fine tuning in one section and then kind of Linda's argument about all the other kind of micromanaging, are we straddling that issue there? if we're making an adjustment here, but none of the others perhaps go through because we just feel like it's down in the weeds. How do we square that with Larry, I think, is kind of the question.
Well, he came in with, what, 4 or 5, and this is just one.
I don't know that those two things are really comparable, but, you know, I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there. And, you know, an individual, you know, could be up to, it's really kind of up to each individual person. I'm just saying, you know, 3 days, I read that, and I'm like,
I totally agree.
If you'd like to make an amendment, sure.
yeah.
Okay. All righty, any more thoughts on the handbook?
Just
Yes, ma'am.
thank Linda for all the hard work on working through all of these amendments.
Thanks Sally too, she's
And
proofreading
Sally,
it.
yes.
Yeah, we know there were a lot of grammatical errors and comments and all that stuff, but we're gonna get that cleaned up. It was more the content to get in front of you. Okay, so the new business, the first ordinance is amending section 27.2 or -2 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Elvis to permit Class 1 electric bicycle operation on the public use trails. This was as a result of some input that we had from residents. The POA had picked it up as well, so had Trailblazers. So I spoke with Trailblazers and also the Walton Family Foundation, and all are agreeable that Class 1 is okay. And if you read the actual ordinance, it means electric bicycles equipped with a motor that provides assistance only when the operator is pedaling. So it's not like a scooter. And that it ceases to provide assistance when the electric bicycle reaches the speed of 20 miles an hour. So for example, when they're not going downhill, the electric motor shuts down if it's over 20. These apparently will not tear up the trails and cause us additional cost in maintenance. And on the other hand, it might provide some of those people who might not otherwise be able to enjoy the trails an opportunity to get out and actually run the trails. So that was the thought behind it.
I was just thinking today, is there any place we can go and like check one out?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are.
Bicycle.
Okay. Do they make any, I mean, I have no problem with it. It kind of makes sense to me. Like you said, some of the really steep hills. I just, as long as it doesn't emit like a lot of noise or anything like that.
No, you don't even hear them.
Okay.
No.
Batteries.
So I reread this thing multiple times, and I thought last time I read it that it was only for disabled use.
No,
No.
So it's for anybody.
Yes,
right.
yes.
That's a separate exception. If you're disabled, you could have a power wheelchair out there. You can
Right.
use it, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Are we opening a can of worms here?
I asked that question.
I mean, where does it stop? I mean, who
It usually stops
determines,
right there.
well, but who determines whether it's a class 1 or whatever's next, class 2 or?
Well, they're
Well, it's an
defined,
industry standard.
they're legally defined. The state law defines them, that's where we got this definition.
Okay,
So, I mean, if it's an electric scooter, it doesn't meet the definition of a class 1, then a police officer can say, hey, get that off the trail, you can't use it.
It's true.
And then who decides? You decide, as a council, you decide what the ordinance is gonna.
no, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand, I'm just looking at enforceability and,
Excuse me. Any other thoughts? Okay. The next ordinance is repealing and replacing section 4-27 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Bella Vista to eliminate the dog licensing requirement and to enact a mandatory microchip requirement for the dogs. This has actually been proposed to us by the animal shelter. And there are a number of reasons. A, we know that there are thousands of dogs here, and I think last year we issued 800 and something licenses. B, it may cut down our costs for animals that end up in the shelter if we get a lot of chipping up straight out of the gate, especially from the animal shelter themselves, because they've already started to do it, so that Leslie could actually scan the animal, find out to whom it belongs, take it home, and we've saved ourselves $110. And then it's a source of revenue, and it also gives more exposure to the animal shelter, was the way that they put it as well. So they see it as a win-win all around. And frankly, I'd like to get out of the dog license business.
I just got mine, so now I'm...
I'll give you an extra chocolate on the way out.
Well, having raised and trained dogs for many years, microchipping, all my dogs have been microchipped, and a couple of years of dog license is more expensive than microchipping, and microchipping is a better way to get your dog back. So I would totally support this, but I didn't notice a penalty for non-compliance.
Well, there's a general code penalty for violation in our code, for any violation that's not
Okay.
specified. I can go pull it for you. I can't remember what it says now. I think it's $1,000 per day of violation.
Okay, well, as long as there's a penalty,
There's a
good.
penalty for anything in the code. There's a
Right.
given penalty.
okay, great.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
Yeah, Mayor, I think on this one, I'd like to figure out an angle where instead of making this mandatory, that seems heavy-handed to me. How about if we structure it to where there are incentives for them to get microchipped?
What would those be? Any idea?
Perhaps no fee for the license. If your dog is microchipped, it's a free license.
I think the animal shelter is looking upon it as another source of revenue.
Well, they would get payment for the microchip, for placing the microchip. They do that? At the
For
animal shelter?
replacing or-
No, for putting the chip in.
Yes.
So if you bring your dog, you would bring it to the shelter,
Mhm.
and they would charge, any idea how much, 30, $35?
They have clinics, and I'm trying to think it was,
$35,
I don't know, $20 or less.
Right,
It's just,
that's
it's like 20.
Yeah.
$20. Okay. I feel more comfortable with that kind of approach. I think we have low compliance with licensing as it is already to that point. 850 licenses sold, purchased in 2019. We got 12,000 residences. I know we got 3,000 or 4,000 dogs here. So at best, we've got a third compliance, maybe 25% compliance. I don't think we'd have any higher compliance than putting a mandatory microchip. Some people are not interested in doing that with their dog, period. And I don't think we ought to try to kind of strong arm into that. If we can incent them there to say, hey, instead of paying $10 a year for your dog license, you can do it one time, you microchip your dog, and your dog is licensed for the rest of its life.
Well, I think, yeah, once it's chipped, it's chipped.
Yeah,
There isn't any future thing at all.
right.
So, yeah, they wouldn't pay the tax here at all.
That's fine. And I think that's the incentive you want to go with,
Right.
rather than, again, the
So that's the way we'd sell.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. Anybody else have any thoughts? We've already talked about the next one. D is a resolution approving the mayor's reappointment of Doug Farner to the Bella Vista Planning Commission for a 4-year term expiring the 1st of March 2024. It's more of a housekeeping item. He has agreed.
I had a question about
Sir.
that. Since he's running to be a JP, I guess he can do this even
Sure.
if he wins. And
Oh, that I can't answer. He would have to decide whether he could still do it or not if he was on a JP.
yeah.
He's actually one right now, isn't he?
No,
No,
He's on
no,
the
I'm
planning
sorry, that's
commission.
Jerry Snow. that was
that's
there.
yours, no.
So, and it's, I assume they meet different days, or?
I'm not sure at all he could still be on the planning commission and a member of the quorum court. I'm pretty sure he couldn't. But I'm not, that's his question to answer,
Yeah.
personally to him,
Okay.
because that's a personal conflict for him.
Okay, the next is a resolution. It's awarding a bid and authorizing the mayor and city clerk to enter into contract with Pinnacle Emergency Vehicles in the amount not to exceed $158,000 for a remount of a 2011 4x4 Chief XL Braun ambulance for the fire department. This is Chief year 3 we've done this,
Yes, that's correct.
and a new ambulance is about $240,000.
About 248, 249, something like that, 250.
So this saves us about $100,000, and we get basically the same thing, and we get the old chassis back. And 2 years ago, you built a brush fire response vehicle.
That's correct for town center
Right.
station.
And then Mike, I think you got the last one for a sign truck.
Yeah, we're waiting on a bed that we ordered for it, and once we get the bed, we'll install it.
Great,
It's a
okay.
side truck.
Have you any thoughts as what you'll do with the other one?
Brush truck for the Highlands.
Oh, the Highlands? Yeah, that's right.
Well, we basically voted to approve it in the city budget anyway, didn't we?
Well, you still have to approve. the
I know
actual-
you do, but I'm just saying it was in there.
Yes, yes, it is in the budget, you're absolutely right. Any thoughts at all? Okay. Now, the next one is something that we do every year, especially with the restricted funds, which is a resolution making various adjustments to the 2020 city budget. And the reason we do it on the restricted funds is because you don't know until the end of the year how much is actually going to be in there. Now, I've got discussion points for each and every one if you'd like to go through it. The restricted funds pretty much speak for themselves. It's when you get into the general fund. The first one is $300,000 for the library, and the ladies from the library are here. They have spent a great deal of time trying to whittle down everything, every single component that has to come in. We didn't know that at the end of the year. Suzanne, do you feel that you pretty much got a good feel for it now as to every single component?
Pretty much.
You've got a contingency built in too, don't you know?
Yeah, there's contingency, there's a lot of unknowns, but there's also a lot of knowns.
Okay.
I did bring this for anyone who wanted to look at it, 8 copies of the plans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Do we have a date yet when they might break the champagne on the portal?
They think mid-March,
Okay.
so, but that changes everything. So, this is an architectural drawing, it shows kind of the rooms.
You want to walk us through just at a high level, please? Or we'll keep them for Larry.
So, also brought John, who knows a lot about IT and all the technology that's going into the new expansion, and then Ellen has really worked very, very, very hard on the children's department. So she's here to answer questions about that. I mean, she has spent hours and hours and hours, but basically, this is the back. So the recycle center would be way down here somewhere. And it is beautiful. I mean, those windows are stunning.
And they really have a huge blind that's going to be motorized that goes up and down?
There's okay, so let's go to, I kind of like this view, but in the community room, there'll be a projector. And those windows are mostly south-facing. And so the projector with all those windows, there's nothing there to cover up the windows right now. So yes, we need motorized blinds for just this portion only.
If you want to see the projector screen that's in John's office on the floor.
Yeah.
And those funds for that would need to come out of the 300.
Yes. And the architect actually drew out and spec'd all of these furniture pieces. But we don't, of course, have to go with that. Well, this will go out on bid. But they did this so that we had a basis, and we had many conversations about the kind of equipment we would need and the kind of furniture we would need. So if you see some of these rooms, like the community room, I think we can only fit 88 chairs in there. We want to make sure that we are compliant with Americans with Disability, because we need to keep that front row open for a wheelchair. So we'll get about 88 chairs in there, and they will store in closets in that room. So we'll be able to seat quite a few people in that room. Parking lot won't be able to handle that many. So let's see, some other.
Is the foundation still talking about the parking lot in the
Yes.
future?
Yes. If you can imagine the existing library, the back exit door here, you can see this hallway, and there's some little study rooms, and then there's a reading room, and this is the big children's department here that Ellen designed.
Well, kind of.
She did, and what a cheery place for kids, because this is all windows here. But my concern was security, making sure that the kids are safe, because Central Library is up here, we're up here. So we need cameras, and we will actually have to change our, our management style of the library. We'll have to do walkthroughs and that kind of thing. But we're taking all the precautions. We've got cameras. We're putting glass doors on these little study rooms so that, because they had some hidden areas where you couldn't see in there. And most of the time, things are designed with all glass. Study rooms are designed with all glass these days, but this didn't get done that way. So we changed out three doors to make them all glass. So just little things like that that have come up along the way. Little changes we've had to make. There's restrooms in there, all ADA compliant, and a little kitchenette, long hallway, a nice conference room. It'd seat about 20.
Good.
Okay.
I'm just laughing, all the glass in the study rooms. I think back when I was a kid, I spent my time watching the squirrels run around in the studies outside.
Yeah.
Studying.
Yeah, I don't know how much studying I've done in there. But
The squirrels are already there.
John's done a whole lot of wiring for data and I don't know what all. We'll have Wi-Fi access and
What are some of the highlights, John?
Well, I think some of the key features are, of course, we'll have wireless internet throughout the building. We're also giving the staff cordless phones. So, like she's saying, as they're going to do walk-arounds,
yeah.
they'll have the phone right there on their pocket or belt. They can communicate with each other that way. There's also a desk at the entryway to the children's area. For that, the conference room, the smaller conference room, we have a large TV that we can do presentations on, and the bigger conference room, the architects have a projector that they're supplying, and then that's what the big 120-inch screen is for. Just for that 88-person meeting room.
120-inch
Yeah.
screen.
Super Bowl parties.
With the schools.
Can you highlight the children's area?
Well, it's going to have a whole lot of room for all the kids that are coming to the library, and that's a bonus thing. So,
And that should cut down the noise in the other parts of the library?
it should.
Are we still giving out earplugs?
No, we are not.
Thank goodness. They actually deliver.
You used to do that?
Yeah, we did.
Wow.
I think that will solve some of the problem
Yeah.
with noise, but especially with the study rooms available and then the reading room right across the hall. People who absolutely need it quiet have places to go. So,
Were you happy with the construction company?
Well, let's see.
Remember that the foundation's built, it's their building and their project to build. We have to run the library in it and fill it with stuff, so we really didn't have much control over any of those factors.
They have a really good super on site that's been he communicates with us very well.
Susan made her voice now.
Anything else that? Here's your extras. Oh, sure. Anything else?
Larry's not here, so he'll need one in the office as
You got
well.
one.
You got copies? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
So on these adjustments, I understand some of the, like the line items, the first one, use of legacy racing fund. Is that what legacy racing? So there was $19,226 left at the end of 2019.
And then we-
Budgeted $7,000, and then you've now.
No, we actually have a donation of $7,000 from Rush Running, and it's sitting in there, and now we want to move it and add it to the 19,000, and it says a minus because you assume that you're going to pay for it all.
Yeah, and I get what you're doing.
Sure.
So I was looking at the column that had, like you said, requested 2020 budget revenues. So that's not in the original, those numbers are not in the original 2020 budget. In that second column.
They're in there, but they're not, no, excuse me, no, they're not, because you don't know what it's going to be.
Okay, and that's why I was asking, because there's some, like, the second line item down, it had $0 at the end of 2019,
Right.
then it said 2,000, and I was like, oh, well, if you had 2,000 you already budgeted for, but you didn't have anything left at the end, why, but then you answered the
Correct.
question, because the
Yeah.
2,000 was not there in the
That's right.
2020 budget.
That's true.
Okay, gotcha.
And we've got everything in here from money for benches for the trails that people have given to, there are actual donations that people give to the police department and they give it to the fire department. And so we don't mix it in with the general funds, we keep it separate. There are some grants that you may remember. There's a STEP grant further down, and it's used for a radar gun is the 3,500, plus there's DUI, speeding, overtime. We're still gonna do that again?
Step grant.
Yeah.
DUI enforcement, speeding overtime.
And then we have a grant, a revenue of Act 833, which we get every year. Do you want to just review what the act is, Chief?
It's actually a grant, basically to provide fire equipment stuff to meet ISO requirements and purposes. And it's, I believe it's insurance turnback funds. It's saved through policies through the year, from year to year. We get about $20,000 to $23,000 a year in that grant. And it's spent all on fire equipment.
And the next grant is a state grant for the ambulance?
That's correct. That's the trauma grant, which we all, everybody that runs an ambulance service participates in the trauma grant program. And that's some money that we can use to put on our ambulance to help with trauma victims. So that's 20-something thousand, I believe, every year we get, close to that.
And on the next page, you can see the SAFER grant. It's now switching over so that the feds will pay us 35% and we fund 65%, so that's the 35% coming in as a grant. And at the bottom of the page, you can see the grants that we have obtained for Glowing Springs and the bridge. And on the last page, under the general fund, the actual breakdown of the Mercy Way Bridge is shown. So you can see the requested expenditures are $148,818, and Kerry has broken it down between the design phase and supplemental agreement. Number one, under the city general fund in that same area for the bridge, we'll see $207,042. That's our 20% of the federal grant for the design. And that's it. Everything else we've been able to cover through grants, through regional planning, state grants, and from the Walton Family Foundation.
And is that 207 already been expended?
Yes, that will be our expenditure, yes.
Was that a 2019 charge though, or 2020?
It'll be coming up to 2020 for
Okay,
design.
all right.
Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. If you have any detailed questions, I would encourage you to get in touch with Carrie. And she can pop it up on the screen in her office. She has lots of backup, as she always does, and we'll be happy to take you through it. Okay, the last piece is for Mike. The asphalt contractor was here in December and working as we were finishing up the budget, and it looked as though he was going to get it all done in time. And there was one piece that he couldn't do because the weather turned, and that was Highland Boulevard.
A portion of it.
Portion of it?
Yes.
And we don't do rollovers. You know, the money wasn't spent, but we come back to council and ask for your approval to amend the city budget so that Mike can actually, on top of what he's going to spend this year, he's also able to address the Highlands Boulevard. What portions of it again?
It would be from Hiwassee Road back towards the gates. And it kind of, that loop, it's so long, Highlands Boulevard, just because of the price tag of it. Feel like I need to split it up, you know, where it's not all coming due at one time. So we're picking the worst of it, which is from Hiwassee Road back towards the gates. And then with all that construction traffic going on out there by, you know, the new bypass, you know, that's probably going to be coming up shortly hereafter.
Yeah.
But it's going to need some attention as well.
We did have a pleasant surprise, I can't remember if I've shared this with council, on Edinburgh, where the street was being torn up by the trucks coming in the back way. And so I sent a note over to Steve Lawrence, and lo and behold, Emery Sapp, who's the contractor, just came in and fixed the road.
Yeah.
And it was only when Mike drove it and thought, wow,
That's what comes in there by Branchwood.
yeah, that's right, that's exactly right.
I actually had, believe it or not, residents ask me about that. Yeah.
Yeah, there were some bad spots. So we had pictures, Mike took pictures and I sent them off to state. And I said, we're gonna have to have some sort of reconciliation here because you can't do this to the roads. And without even talking to me, they went to the contractor and the contractor went out and fixed it. And I don't think he's running heavy trucks on that road anymore, is he?
It's the traffic has died down,
Yeah.
but they had been running the semi trucks full, box culverts, that type, the really heavy loads.
That's good, because there were some pretty good chunks out of it.
Oh, there
Just
were.
because my neighbor mentioned, I did drive back there.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad.
I just want to understand the transaction a little bit better. We've approved a 2020 budget previously. Is this increasing the budget by $175,000?
Yes.
Is the funding coming with it from the prior year?
This was in the 2019 budget, but it didn't get spent in 2019. So
Right.
they're asking you, and of course, it's still sitting in the bank, so they're asking you to go
Okay.
ahead and push that over to 2020.
Okay,
Add that to the 2020 and
okay,
authorize us to spend
okay.
it.
The funding comes with it. We don't have to
Yeah,
find
yeah,
it.
yeah, it's the money's in the bank, we're not spending the money twice, yeah. We never had to spend it.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll go into the top three. Doug, why don't you start with Kingsland? We have some good news.
Yeah, Kingsland Light, I haven't driven through there since about noon today, but that was supposed to start flashing today.
They are flashing.
Are they? And then fully operational next Tuesday, the 25th, is what they told me today.
And it's going to be included in the contract with our company that monitors them.
All the other stoplights that'll be timed and monitored and data collected.
So that's
along
taken
with
us
all
3
of them.
years.
So flashing yellow north and south, flashing red coming down Kingsland.
Coming back down into Kingsland, it's flashing red.
Yeah.
And north-south, yes. Including the left-hand turn yield arrow on the southbound traffic, it's flashing as well. And it's done more just to bring awareness
Keep people
that this thing is,
heads up.
it's about to go live. And we put all the signs up over the weekend. Finally. I sent everybody out an update on the central trails or the Little Sugar. Do you want to give us just a thumbnail, please?
That update had everything that I had already prepared. They said there's about 47 miles of soft surface complete. This tunnel up here, tunnel number 2 on Lancashire, they're finishing up some utilities. And
The traffic light's going to be turned on this week?
later this week, and that one's going to require a little bit more time for construction work than the prior tunnels you've seen. I think there's going to be a lot of earth moving in that area. And then the last tunnel is still up in
That's
the
tunnel number 2.
the budget. One bridge complete, one bridge started, the third bridge is not under construction yet, but moving along. Actually rode some of the trails down there off Chelsea. I used that parking lot yesterday and took my kids out, and people were using it. Everything was great.
Yeah, out by my house, the one that's Collin Hills golf cart parking lot.
Yeah.
What goes across right there, and then they put the tunnel up over the hill down the other side.
Yep.
So I've walked that like a couple times now. It's really nice.
It is.
It's sweet. I didn't expect to see any bikes there, but because it was wet yesterday, I could see tire tracks in it, and a young man on a bike actually passed me. So they're already using it. Yeah.
To that point, we've kind of announced already that phase 1 of the Little Sugar Trails, the central trails, are now open. And so I was checking with Doug today to see, what that means in terms of have the city and the POA taken over responsibility for the maintenance of those trails yet. And we think that's not the case yet.
No, not yet.
And that perhaps in that process, what I hope is a part of that process is that we have an opportunity before we accept that responsibility to be able to call out, like a punch list. If you were buying a house or something along those lines, you'd say, before I go to closing, I want A, B, and C fixed. And so just to make sure that we have that opportunity to express anything that we feel like is undone, needs to be corrected before we accept that responsibility, I hope that's part of the process.
So what we did on the back 40 was we let them run the back 40 as it became available. And the real reason for doing that was the constant use of the trail keeps the weeds down and everything else. And then there is, I can't remember the language, but there is language in the contract with Trailblazers that states that if, I think it's the first year, if I remember correctly, if they find problems on the trail, then the warranty kicks in and they will fix it.
Okay.
So you may have seen them on the, the first year. I remember over in Buckingham, they had to change part of the trail coming down from the trailhead because it was too steep. It was going straight down, so they put in a switchback. So yes,
We'll have
there is
that
the ability to
opportunity.
do that.
The other thing that I learned today is that I'd heard some feedback about some of the tunnels that have been put in. This is really, very unique territory for any community, I think, to have tunnels for bike paths under their roads. And some of what I've heard for people who are driving by those sites say, wow, that's an eyesore. It looks like a bomb went off here, and it needs to be softened, groomed, perhaps landscaped in some way. And what I learned today is that's being addressed, that these tunnel areas are not complete yet.
That's right.
Almost any one of the ones you go by and large, they're still working on them. Those, the contractor, I happened to speak to one today that was working up on Chelsea, and they said, yes, we have more work to do in kind of doing exactly that, grooming these areas, kind of bringing them back to a natural state so they don't just look like somebody set a bomb off and there's gravel all over the place, and it's quite an eyesore. So there's more work to be done there yet, too.
And again, that was similar to the back 40. There were some areas where it did look like a bomb had gone off, and they came in and groomed it.
The one on Colin Hills actually looks nice. They graded it all down and looks like they planted grass, and it's starting to come up. So I thought it turned out. I know that the one on Highlands, was mentioned earlier today, past the gate. There's some water standing down low down there, and I don't know if any of that can be corrected or not, but people might have said something to you about it.
Yeah, we've got a lot of calls on that one.
Okay.
Well, the trail, I walked around that today, the trail comes out of the tunnel and does break to the right because there is, I don't know if it's a pond or a pool of water there, and it's probably going to be there often. But the trail goes to the right of that, and there's a nice rock bridge that crosses over what would be water flowing into that pond. It almost seems certain to me that in days of really heavy rain, like we're prone to have, that area is going to be underwater, and perhaps there'll be water in the tunnel. And that, I don't think that's a deal breaker, and I don't think we need to send, teams in there to drive away the water when the water's there. It's just going to be that section of the trail is flooded, and users will have to deal with that. So I see that. I know people have expressed that particular concern about the one on Highlands, that there's standing water down there, and that seems like part of the natural configuration of that.
A lot of vegetation was moved, and that's because of that. But once that gets reestablished, it'll soak up a lot. A lot of trees were taken out too, so that causes a lot of standing water. So it may take some time to soak all that up.
Hey, so up here on Lancashire, so all that work going on up there, there's a tunnel going in there. Is that right? Man, that's a
At Camden.
big job right there.
And I do know that the Walton Family Foundation is already talking to the Bella Vista Foundation about more trees, not only giveaways, but also to put on the trails. I did want to draw your attention to the very last bullet, which you may have missed, the large Sugar Creek Bridge. It's the one right here. They're going to be starting on that soon. I don't have an actual start date, but you may have seen them doing work and getting prep and getting ready for it. It's an old bridge.
So that's gonna be under construction at the same time the tunnel and at
I don't
Camden
know.
is?
I haven't got a date started.
I don't think so.
I don't think-
Camden
I
will
hope
be done-
not.
Camden will be done before they start.
Now that I moved my office, I get to go through both of them.
Doug, what's happening on Sunset? Is it still the same status quo?
I got an update from them this morning, and the owner's attorneys are in talks with the construction company's attorneys.
Baldwin Shell?
He wouldn't tell me much, but he did tell me that they had a new contractor in place. I know I shared that with you the last time, but that's about all they're offering up. They're not giving me a start date. They're just telling me that there's a new contractor in place, and Baldwin Shell's attorneys are trying to set that in place and make that happen. So
Okay, I think we were told before somewhere around the middle of next month.
they told me 2 months when I talked to him 2 weeks ago.
They've already got
He
other
didn't
jobs?
share that with me today.
Okay. All right. Anything else anybody wants to put on the table?
Yeah, go ahead, John. On the Central Trails, what's the latest, what's the total price on that for the
Oh, I'd have to go
foundation?
back and look.
Because there's been some puts and takes with the
Well, there-
tunnels changing and all.
Yeah, there are two, we had change orders and the price dropped, I remember, by 182,000. I think, if I remember correctly, it was in the 3 million area. But then all the soft trails, that's an unknown price that the Waltons are spending directly with those companies like Rock Solid. They are not part of our contract.
Oh, I
They're
see.
separate. If I was a guessing man based on the back 40, it's probably another 3, maybe 4. Steve?
Quick update perhaps on the 2040 comprehensive plan process. What's happening, where we're at?
I think at this point, we're ready to move forward to the planning commission. I've talked to each of you, I've talked to everyone about their feedback and gotten those to the consultant, and they've implemented a lot of those recommendations, and so I don't think there's anything else we can do to change it at this point, so I can get with Jason and get that on the planning commission's agenda to have that. taken a look.
They'll have public hearing and hear public input on all that, and then make a recommendation to you, and then it'll be up to you to either adopt or reject a new master plan.
Is there like an opportunity for us to sit down with Gould Evans as a council to have some, like a meeting to kind of go through it and get some of their feedback and thoughts? I mean, I read through it, I looked obviously through like the whole thing, but
We might be able to get a conference call on the TV going. I'm not sure that they'll come all the way down, but, do you want to bounce it off, Graham?
Sure.
I know you probably don't have a list, but what type of feedback did you get from some, like, council, like, the changes that need to be made?
Oh, I got several pages from Larry. Linda had a couple of pages. He came down and we went through all of those in detail with him, and he showed us where he had made those changes in the plan. And so, Linda, do you want to share anything about that? I mean,
Well, we were satisfied that, I think that the changes that we had kind of requested, they did their best to
You mean on the first
address.
go around? The first time that we saw it?
No, this
No,
was
this
after,
was-
No, this was-
after the first round of feedback.
Yeah, this was more recent.
I'm trying to understand. So I provided feedback also. I wasn't aware. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, everybody's feedback went to them.
Okay.
And then he came down and met with me and the mayor, and we
Okay.
went through everyone's feedback.
Okay.
And he showed us where in the plan he had made those corrections, changes, updates, and so forth.
So he was trying to work all of the feedback that he got. He was trying to work all of it into the plan.
He tried.
Okay.
Would you agree, Mayor? Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree. Alrighty, thanks, Doug. Before we close, everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with the run and ride that we usually have in December with Mike Rush. He's going to change it to just a run because frankly the ride wasn't all that popular. And maybe because it was late in the year or whatever. So he's going to move it up to sometime in November. And he'll have on the first day the normal 13, 20, and 40-mile runs. And then on Sunday, when they'll have to start it on late Saturday, he may have 50, 70, and 100-mile runs. So I know that you like hiking with your backpack, so this is your opportunity to train and get ready for it.
I don't know if I want to do 100.
I'll watch.
So stay tuned for more.
Oh, by the way, I just want to say, so, you know, I backpack, we're just kind of joking, but when I was walking last night, it was like 6:20, and it was dark, and this young man comes up behind me on his bicycle, right? He's got his his bike light on. And so if anybody calls you and tells you there's somebody camping on the trails, because I have my backpack. I'm getting ready to go on a couple trips, and I had a plastic bag that I picked up on the side of the road in Coleman. I had to pick up some cans and some trash, so I'm carrying it along in one hand, and I've got my backpack on my back. Yeah, dude. And I'm walking the trail, and here comes this young man. I'm surprised he didn't stop, turn around, and go the other way. But there's no one camping on the trail.
I'll go ahead and cancel that complaint.
I'm just saying, it's probably coming.
If you've got
camping on the trail, it's
Chief
going to be
Grant,
on
if you've got
Facebook.
cuffs, we can go ahead and take care of this right now.
Yeah, it's going to be on Facebook, so you know who it is.
A couple more quick things, Mayor Christie, before we leave. It's been tradition that you give a state of the city.
It'll be done.
And we're going to do that
It's
in
written.
an upcoming work session. And then just
No, at the regular meeting.
Yes, at the regular
yes,
meeting.
yes, thank you. I also want to say kudos to the Rush Running Group, who holds an event here and then sees it appropriate to take a share of the proceeds from that event and turn it back over to the city to go towards maintenance of the trails. And I think that sets an example, perhaps that we ought to be considering for any of the events that come into Bella Vista, to use our resources here. I know we put extra police out on the trails during those days. I don't know if they're working overtime or if that's part of the standard shift, but there are expenses associated with these events, and I think it's appropriate for the city to look for ways to try to monetize this asset that we have, especially in those cases where we have extra expenses to go along with it.
I agree.
And I recognize Rush Running
Mike does a great
for
job.
leading the way there and seeing that that is an appropriate use of any proceeds that they might have from an event in Bella
I
Vista.
agree wholeheartedly.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
The Greenway Spur from Blowing Springs to Metfield may be on the March 16th work session, so just wanted to give you a quick update. The POA is to vote on that license agreement on the 27th.
Okay.
That's correct, Jason? Is that right?
I don't know when the POA is going to vote.
And if it
They don't communicate
passes,
with me.
if it passes, we will do bid opening on the 28th
Okay.
at the engineering firm's office. I met with about 10 contractors last week. They've all been out and done site visits, and will be getting their bids to us on the 28th. And so that will go on the March 16th work session, the March 23rd regular session, and if approved, we need to have a contract signed by March the 31st. So, and then they will have 10 to 11 months to complete the job. The contractor will.
Chief Grace, can you give us a rundown on where we are with the fence, please?
Yeah, we're out with our RFP out right now. It was advertised last Friday, it has to be advertised this coming Friday. And then bid will close next Monday, 9 a.m. We'll take any of the bids that we've gotten at that point, we'll open them up, and we'll select whichever bid is best suited for us and meets all of our needs, and then
Then that'll have to come back to the council.
And then it'll be brought, so I was going to say, then it'll be brought back to council. So I suspect we'll be able to get it in March in front of the council for approval, at which point we'll be able to get the work done.
Good. Anything else? Thank you for joining us this evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, council members.